Representative Coulter, you also have House File 1489. Would you like to move that House File 1489 be recommended to be re-referred to the Taxes Committee?
That is my motion, Mr. Chair.
Okay, Representative Coulter has moved that House File 1489 be recommended to be re-referred to the Taxes Committee. Did you want to describe the bill before moving the amendments, or would you like to move the amendments first, Representative Coulter?
Why don't I go through the bill first, and then we can have discussion on the amendments.
Sure, sounds good.
Excuse me.
To your bill.
Thank you. So House File 1489 deals with our state's political contribution refund program, one of the real hallmarks of our public campaign financing system. I'm assuming most of us in this committee and anybody who would probably be watching the Elections Committee at 9 a.m. is probably pretty familiar with the PCR program. But just sort of the short version is that Minnesotans are able to claim a credit of up to $50 for individuals and $100 for married couples for political contributions to state candidates and/or party units, provided that those candidates agree to spending limits. It's one of the ways that the state of Minnesota has incentivized campaign spending limits and small dollar contributions. The PCR was established in 1990, among other campaign finance and public disclosure law changes, and has remained virtually the same since. I think we're all aware that much has changed since 1990, including the fact that I am no longer 4 years old, with the amount of funding needed to run an effective campaign being another glaring example. This bill would update the PCR program by raising the maximum credit to $100 for individuals and $200 for married couples. Nothing else about the program, including who is eligible to receive or authorize the credit, would change with this bill. So I think, why don't we go ahead, if we could, Mr. Chair, and go ahead with the amendments, and then we can kind of discuss the bill as it looks if any amendments are adopted.
Sure, sounds good. So would you like to move the A3 amendment, Representative?
Yeah, we can start with the A3 amendment.
Okay, Representative Coulter has moved the A3 amendment. Would you like to describe that one?
Certainly. So the A3 amendment just basically allows for, in this case, it would be the Commissioner of Revenue, because the PCR is administered by the Department of Revenue, to annually adjust contribution limits that would receive this credit, but for inflation, and any adjustments would be rounded to the nearest $10.
Okay. Thank you. Is there any discussion to the A3 amendment? Okay. Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay. The amendment's been adopted. Representative Coulter, you have the A4 amendment.
I do indeed, Mr. Chair. And this amendment
Coulter
deals...
has moved the A4 amendment.
Apologies. Yes, I moved the A4. This amendment deals with another sort of another piece of our public financing system in Minnesota, the state public subsidy grant that candidates receive, and this just basically inserts a blank appropriation into the current statutory language, which would allow us to, because the bill is being laid over, would allow us to potentially come back and add additional funding to that public subsidy program.
Any discussion to the A4 amendment? Okay. Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay. The amendments are adopted. We have 4 people who wish to testify on this bill. The first is Mary Hartnett, and after Mary Hartnett will be Lily Sassy. If you could please keep your testimony to just a couple minutes, we'd appreciate it. Okay, welcome to the committee. Please identify yourself and proceed with your testimony.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, my name is Mary Hartnett, and I'm the Executive Director of Clean Elections Minnesota. And I just skipped. I'm testifying on 2 bills, sorry. A nonpartisan nonprofit that promotes electoral policies that reflect the will of the people and not the power of money. Thank you, Representative Coulter, for introducing this important bill and for introducing House File 1489. We support 1489. Public participation in the public contribution reimbursement program has been declining, and this gives a needed boost. Public financing of elections strengthens our democracy. It increases the proportional importance of small donors and average Minnesotans so that candidates do not depend as much on large contributors, lobbyists, or special interests. They encourage voters to participate in political campaigns, and they limit spending in political campaigns. A study by the Center for Governmental Studies stated that Minnesota's public finance program has for decades been considered one of the finest in the nation, with a high participation rate, a higher participation rate than other states. 85.5% of candidates participated recently. Raising the refund will increase its effectiveness. Last, we ask the author and committee to go one step further and consider supporting the recommendations from the Campaign Finance Board and increase the amount an individual could make to $200 instead of the $100 in the bill and to $400 from the $200 per married couple in the bill. It will encourage more participation in the program and increase the amount of public financing. We urge your support for 1489. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Next testifier is Lily Sassy, and after Lily Sassy will be Hallie Norman.
I think Ms. Sassy
Representative
would
Coulter.
prefer not to testify on this bill and will testify on the next bill.
Okay, sure, that would be fine. So Hallie Norman would be, oh, same thing? Okay, sorry. Then our only other signed up testifier is Jeff Sigurdson. Welcome to the committee, Director Sigurdson. Please identify yourself and proceed with your testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee, Jeff Sigurdson, Campaign Finance and Public Disclosure Board. As was mentioned, the board's recommendation on the PCR program was actually for an increased amount of $200 per person, $400 per couple. Unlike the other legislative recommendations by the board, I didn't frankly press those recommendations in terms of bringing a separate bill to the committee because I knew that this body and the Senate was considering other options in terms of involving contributors with the public subsidy program. And I knew that there would be a bill that would increase the amount of the PCR program directly. But I did want to highlight the board's rationale for even making this recommendation, which is that the board believes that the current public subsidy program is in fact kind of withering on the vine. And is losing its effectiveness in providing the stated goals of the program and may not be able to do so in the future unless there are changes made to that program. For example, the PCR program. In 2007, 58% of all contributions from individuals for candidates who signed the public subsidy agreement were refunded through the PCR program, 58%. In 2008, it was still 45% of all contributions from individuals were refunded through the PCR program, showing then a link between those individuals and the PCR program and its effectiveness in raising funds for candidates. Most recently, in 2020, that amount had dropped to only 16% of contributions from individuals were refunded. In 2021, the last year in which there are numbers available, that number had dropped to only 13% of contributions from individuals were refunded through the PCR program. So the ability of the PCR program to be used to generate contributions from individuals who live in the district or at least live in the state is apparently losing its effectiveness. It also has declined in just pure numbers. In 2002, candidates issued $3.3 million of PCR receipts that were refunded by the Department of Revenue. In 2021, it was an all-time low of $618,000 that were issued by candidates and refunded by the Department of Revenue. So again, the value of the PCR program in terms of attracting local donors or donors who are not PACs, not lobbyists who are limited under the special source limitations to contribute to candidates has declined over the years. I would also quickly, as an aside, say here that I think that there should be a discussion, although not part of the board's recommendation. I believe there is some interest in looking at whether or not the method of issuing a PCR is in fact something that needs to be updated. It's the same process that we had in 2020. It's very paper intensive. You get a receipt from the candidate. You then have to fill out a form, assuming you can find it on the Department of Revenue website. You then have to find an envelope and a stamp, and you then mail it in. It would seem that there would be an opportunity here, regardless of the amount that the body ends up deciding to fund the PCR program at, to modernize that approach and make it more approachable both for contributors and hopefully more effective for the state as well. I know that the checkoff program is not in front of you here, but just briefly, I would also like to say that because it is the second half of the public subsidy program, that frankly, it's in trouble as well. In For example, in 1977, 27% of all taxpayers checked off for one of the parties when they filled out the tax form. In 2021, that amount was 3.6%. So from 27% to 3.6%. So I occasionally get questions saying, how come my public subsidy payment is smaller? The answer is because there's less money available. And at some point, I think it's likely that there will be a tipping point at which, again, the effectiveness of the public subsidy program and meeting the stated goals of that program simply won't occur unless there's modifications to that program. I think that's all I had to say. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your testimony. Are there any members of the public who wish to speak on this bill? Okay. Seeing none, we can turn to member discussion. Lead Torkelson.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. First, a couple of questions directly related to the bill. So the A3 amendment, Representative Coulter, has this language that would automatically increase beyond the $100 that's being established in this bill based on inflation and rounded to the nearest $10. Can you just explain the reasoning behind that and how it would work?
Representative Coulter.
Certainly. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Representative Torkelson, for the question. I think, as I mentioned, the numbers are in that the numbers for the credits are the same as they were in 1990, and so I think there is a recognition that if there is interest in continuing the political contribution refund program, that maybe we not wait, 33 years to come back and reevaluate the numbers and hopefully adjust them much more frequently to sort of meet the demands of inflation and the costs of funding a campaign. I think obviously the question of what inflation looks like moving forward, particularly with regards to rounding to the nearest $10, may sort of limit the efficacy of that particular provision. If inflation continues as it has been, it's very hard to say, but I think that's an important piece that we need to consider as far as the continued future of the political contribution refund program.
Lead Torkelson.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, I would just comment on that particular perspective that you're really only addressing one aspect of this program that Mr. Sigurdson has highlighted. There are numerous issues that should be discussed and evaluated, and we should reach, I think, some kind of a consensus on how we should either make this program more effective or forget about it. Second question, Mr. Chair, if I may, the ... dots in here regarding the total amount attributed to the program. What happens, Representative Coulter, whatever the limit is in the end, what happens when if we would happen to hit that total appropriation? How does that affect the way this program works?
Representative Coulter.
Excuse me, Mr. I'm sorry, there was a bit of background noise. Could you repeat your question, please?
Well, thank you.
Lead
So
Torkelson.
the limit in the past has been $1,020,000. What happens when that total amount has been allocated in a given year?
Representative Coulter. We can also bring Director Sigurdson down if that would be helpful.
Yeah, I think the public subsidy program, as Director Sigurdson mentioned, is funded in this case both by the statutory appropriation and by the checkoff, the funding that tax filers voluntarily contribute to it. Director Sigurdson can correct me if I'm wrong, but the number is what it is, and however much it based on the way that it's distributed, that's the amount of money that's just available for the public subsidy.
Yeah. Director Sigurdson, do you have any follow-up?
Mr. Chair, Representative Torkelson, the only clarification I would add is, remember, there's two pots of money. The checkoff amount from the tax form is dedicated to candidates of a particular party. The general account, which is the amount that is the blank, the dot here, is divided up by office regardless of party. So there is kind of two different pots of money here. This one would not affect the checkoff amount. It would affect the base payment that goes to a candidate of a particular office.
I can also say, Lead Torkelson, this amendment was prepared prior to our target coming out, and given the amount, and so that we wanted some flexibility there. So that's the reason the dots were put in. Based on what the target ended up being, as we learned after the amendment was prepared, it's probably not going to be a huge amount over the $1 million that's in here already. So
Yeah,
Lead Torkelson.
no arguments with the amount. I'm really trying to grasp the significance of the ceiling. So if I'm understanding this correctly, the ceiling creates a first-come, first-served situation. If the applications that get submitted for a refund are submitted after we've reached the target, whatever that amount is, there is no more money available for that particular program. Is that correct?
Director Sigurd?
That's the next bill, I believe, is.
Representative Coulter?
I think we might be talking about different streams of money here. So the A4 amendment deals with the public subsidy program, not the political contribution refund program. There is no limit to the amount of money that can be used for the political contribution refund program. The amount of money in the A4 amendment would relate to the public subsidy program.
Lead Torkelson, follow?
Yes, I'm getting more confused by the minute. So I thought the amount
what I
of
get
money
from
in
the
the public subsidy program was determined by the amount of people that check off that box on their tax form. What am I missing here?
Director Sigurdson?
Mr. Chair, Representative Torkelson, correct. The number of people who check off influences that pot of money that's divided up by candidates of that party. So if you check off for the Republican Party, that's divided up by all Republican candidates who qualify for the public subsidy payment. The general amount, the general account, which is the account that's being modified here from $1,020,000, that currently the $1,020,000 is divided up by the number of candidates, for example, for House that qualify for a public subsidy regardless of party. So that would increase, assuming that number goes up, that increases that general account payment. It doesn't impact at all the checkoff amount.
Lead Torkelson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Somewhere in the catacombs of my mind, I did know that. I just, so there's an even distribution of that, whatever the ... amount ends up being is distributed to all candidates, and the checkoff dollars are distributed by party based on how many people check off the box on their forms. And with that, I think I understand better where we're at.
Thank you, Lead Torkelson. Representative Greenman?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, both of you, for this conversation. I think it's really helpful to ground our conversation about our public financing system and the system that was set up more than 30 years ago. I think this is a question for Director Sigurdson, but as we think about, and I think I heard sort of the values in our public financing system, one is the ability of candidates to be able to run with public money as opposed to PAC lobbyist money. And then the other is to incentivize and really to bring more small dollar, more of our constituents into the process. And I think that that's sort of the values underlying the PCR is really allowing folks who are small dollar donors to come to participate and then to get a refund. I'm wondering, as we talk about increasing the amount, and I know you probably have done this because of the fiscal note and everything else, if we increase the amount from $50 to $100, do we anticipate that will bring more people into using it or just refund more money?
Director Sigurdson?
Mr. Chair, Representative Greenman, one technical clarification. Because this is outside of Chapter 10A, the board did not participate in the fiscal note.
Thank you.
In my opinion, the number of people who will use the PCR program will go up, will be probably more affected by making the program easier to use than by increasing the amount, in my opinion. Again, I believe that the current system is so paper heavy and puts so much of the burden on the donor to be able to get the refund. They have to know, frankly, what they're doing. They have to be willing to spend the time to do it. They have to be able to jump through some hoops. That I don't know that it will increase, in my opinion, I don't know it will increase the number of people who participate, although undoubtedly it'll go up some. But I think that it has to go hand in hand with modernizing the system of issuing the PCR, in my opinion.
Representative Green?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Director Sigurdson. And I really appreciate this as some. I think one of the things when we talk about public financing is probably most of us sitting around this table have some experience. Our treasurers have some experience with this, what I would say. I think I can confirm is a very paper-heavy process. I think for donors who are unfamiliar with it. Sometimes it's also a hard sell to say, wait a couple of weeks and you'll get your contribution in the mail. I think that's why when we're thinking about reforming the systems, one of the things we need to think about is the value of bringing more small donors, bringing more of our constituents into this process. We know that actually impacts not just how we run our campaigns, but when folks contribute $5, $10, $15, $20, they're actually more likely to participate in other ways, including voting. So I really appreciate this, and I think as we have this conversation about our public financing system and how we reform or tweak or whatever we're going to do with our current system, making it more accessible and really thinking about how do we bring more people in. And then I also think as we think about how we're going to spend our resources, really making sure it's an effective way that we're countering the balance and really trying to ensure that it's our constituents, our voters, folks who are just participating because they care about the work we're doing here are at the center of it. So I really appreciate your feedback and expertise, and thank you, Representative Coulter, for starting this conversation.
Seeing no additional, Lead Torkelson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a couple of general comments on PCR. First, certainly the current program is antiquated and deserves to be looked at as far as modernizing it. I know I don't write as many checks as I used to, and I know people that don't write any checks, as a matter of fact, and filling out forms is not appealing. On the other hand, I think it's important to note that there are 2 times during the life of this program that this program has been suspended, or not funded, I guess, I think would probably be the correct term. And that's occurred in general when we've had a deficit. Given the amount of spending that was revealed yesterday, we very well may be headed for a deficit sometime in the near future. At that time, it's very possible that this program will be suspended again, regardless of how much we are able to modernize it or how much money we're able to put on the ... line. This is a serious consideration, and I think it's worth thinking about.
Representative Bonner, briefly.
Thank you. Sorry, I raised my hand 3 times. I don't think anybody saw me. So I'm just curious, Mr. Sigurdson, as you probably know, I have a little bit of an affinity for IT. And I'm curious if there's ever been any consideration, study, or attempts to look at ways to modernize the program technologically, because I can tell you when I talk to donors, I too prefer to have those small dollar donors. In fact, my campaigns have almost exclusively been run by that over the last 4 cycles. But what I hear from them is, one, sometimes they don't want to bother with the amount because it's just too small to bother with. And the other is, gosh darn it, nobody has stamps anymore, right? And so I'm just curious if we've ever looked at or done any study or evaluation on ways to improve the system electronically, or if that's ever been approached.
Director Sigurdson.
Mr. Chair, Representative, I would say no because at least initially there was probably 2 problems. One, while the Campaign Finance Board is sort of the face for this program to candidates and party units, the Department of Revenue is actually administering the program. And I think the other issue is a hard one, frankly, to get around, which is that the Department of Revenue tracks this to make sure that no one gets more than $50 or $100 per couple by Social Security number. And I don't think we want the board to have people's Social Security numbers. I would at least be reluctant to take on that responsibility. And so there has to be a way of around that. I would suggest that there may be a way of finding a different way of making sure no one gets more than 1 payment. Perhaps we can use a direct match on name and address that provides sufficient security to the Department of Revenue to say, okay, this is this person and they haven't received more than $50 or $100 or whatever amount we end up at. And we can go ahead and use that without their social security number. If the Department of Revenue can feel secure with not having a social security number, then I think it could be built into the software that most committees use to file with the board. You put in someone's contribution, they've indicated that they would like a PCR refund, you click a button, and it's generated automatically in terms of a report that we forward to the Department of Revenue would be one approach. But again, the question is that darn social security number, so we have to find a way around that.
Representative Bonner, follow-up?
Thank you, Mr. Sigurdsson.
Okay, thank you. Seeing no additional member questions, Representative Coulter, do you have any closing remarks?
Certainly, Mr. Chair, and just quickly, I did forget to mention that because this is a program administered by the Department of Revenue, this requires a revenue estimate, not a fiscal note. I didn't think to check if that was posted online, but if it's not, I can certainly send it to the committee administrator if members are interested in that, what those numbers look like.
Sure, thank you.
So just in closing, I would say, and this has sort of been alluded to already, that this bill and the one that we're about to take up present us with an opportunity to discuss the future of public campaign financing in the state of Minnesota. In the 70s, 80s, and 90s, Minnesota was a national leader in public campaign financing because we had leaders who understood the importance of a politics that is accessible to everyone, not just those who have or are able to easily access great wealth. The PCR program has been integral to that system, and given that this program has not been updated since it was signed into law by Governor Perpich, I think an update is appropriate.
Thank you. With that, Representative Coulter renews the motion that House File 1489 as amended is recommended to be re-referred to the Taxes Committee. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, motion prevails. The bill is re-referred to the Taxes Committee.